Hey, everybody, it's straight up 12 o'clock here on the left side of the country, 3 o'clock on the right-hand side. Good to be with you today on Daily Distinction. Glad that you are here. For some reason, our guest is not with us just yet, and I understand, things happen and all that. We were chatting this morning, though, so hopefully nothing's wrong with the connection and everything's okay with the link. Matter of fact, let me just send her a link again. And whoops. Technology, isn't it wonderful?
Sorry about that. I jumped on the wrong link, and too many links today, Scott.
I am so sorry. Well, yeah, the funny thing was, it all of a sudden dawned on me, maybe I'll send you an email. So I sent an email, not realizing I cut my camera off while I was doing that. So
sorry. So good to see you.
I will be teaching technology here shortly. It's great to see you too.
You guys all healthy and safe?
Everybody's good. How about you?
Good. Yes. We now kind of joke about it. We say, as long as everyone's healthy and mom and dad are good, it's going to be a good day. We'll handle the rest. Yeah.
My mom is years old. I don't want her to disown me when I mention that, but she has been in great health and
good.
At her age, you always, you keep your fingers crossed. It's a challenging time.
Yeah. My mom and dad are older too. And my dad is in that high risk category. So we just, every day we're like, oh man, just behave. They finally are behaving now. For a while, Scott.
I get it. No, I totally get it. It's touch and go there for a while, right?
It was,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Vegas has to be just so surreal right now.
Yeah, it is. It's oh gosh, it's a wonderful day on the internet, isn't it? I'm even hardwired in here, and I can tell it's spotty. So I'm going to try something different here. Gee whiz, I never have this trouble. And here I've got
I have nothing to do with it.
I've got a great guest like you, and there we go. So anyway, it's highest unemployment rate in the nation, and just a very, very difficult time for a lot of folks here. And casinos and everything are going to reopen here very shortly. All the gyms and everything are reopening on Friday. There's a huge difference of opinion about that, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. Hey, let me catch up here real quick because we got some folks that are saying hi to us, like Pam, who I don't know if you know Pam from NSA or not. She is somebody that I've known for a long, long time.
The name is familiar,
yeah. Mike is in San Diego watching. There's Brian. Hey, good to see you, Brian. Brian watches from Wisconsin. Dwayne is there. I got a package from Dwayne yesterday. I got to talk to him about. Bruce is close to you. He's in the Chicagoland area.
All right, good.
There, Curtis is always great to see Curtis, and Scott is a loyal viewer. Yeah, I'm back. So that's good. Hey, Stacey, I've been talking about you for the last couple of days here and giving a little background, but I think it's better if we start with it coming from you rather than me. So tell me a little bit about you and how you got into this and how did you become a leading consultant? Tell me more about that.
You probably have heard many people say, Scott, I fell into it. And I literally fell into it because I was working. I'm from Wisconsin. So the two that are from Wisconsin totally can get your stuff.
What town in Wisconsin? Excuse me.
Oh
I got to ask.
So this is really going to test them out. It's a tiny little town called Marathon. It's a farming community. Central part of Wisconsin, about 2.5 hours straight north of Madison.
Oh, okay.
If that kind of puts it into perspective.
I have a great buddy who grew up between Monroe and Judah. And I have another friend in Barron, Wisconsin. So I know a lot of small towns. That's a new one on me. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. So sorry.
No, so that's where I started. I worked for a not-for-profit, Scott, and you can relate to this. I was brought in to be a meeting planner. I hired speakers. I would be our MC for our events, had no idea what I was doing. So I started to just hang on to speakers' shirt tails and then moved to Chicago, which would have been 18 years ago. And worked for a consulting company, more around presentation skills, but it never felt right. Like I never could understand, why are we helping people become better presenters, but not better communicators, and just how they show up every day and how they interact. And then 18 years later, right around that time frame, I decided, let's just do this. Let's see what happens and start building a company out of it. And that's really where our focus is to increase individuals' awareness of how much influence they really have rather than what they believe to be true.
Tell me a little bit more about, and Brian knows where
Brian, there you go. I like you, Brian.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about what that distinction between being a good presenter and being a good communicator.
Yeah. And this is where I started to figure out, I think I've got something here. To me, presenters were, I've got a big presentation coming up, however we define that, and we turn it on. Right? We really practice, we put our message together. To me, influence really is, how do you show up? How do you consistently stay showed up Monday to Monday? That your body language, your messaging, they are always consistent, no matter if you're doing what we're doing right now, Scott, or whether it's on stage or it's over the phone. To me, that's true influence, that people can really relate to you because consistently, your personal brand, you always show up the same way. There's never any guesses.
There we go. I'm sorry. I'm interested in leadership is a topic, and this is one of the things I was mentioning when I was talking about you before, is that leadership is a topic too that's fascinating to me, because a lot of people talk about it, but it's harder to define. And I'm just really curious, how would you define leadership? Yeah. I mean, leaders obviously have influence, and we'll talk about that in a second, but what's the Stacey definition of leadership?
I think especially now, Scott, it's the true leaders are coming out. And we've always known that communication skills is the number one skill for any leader. Because when you get to a leadership role, you're not so much doing the work anymore. You're out there delegating. You're constantly delegating. And your messaging, if there's any incongruency with it, or if there's no consistency with it, or there's any guesses who you're trying to influence, you will not be able to get people to act on what you have to say. And I think now more than ever, because there's so much noise, there's so many more ways that we can push a message out there as a leader, you've got to be really sensitive to, what's the reputation that I want to be proud of Monday to Monday? How do I want to do that? How do I want to achieve that? And how am I going to stand out from all this noise?
And I'm assuming too, with influence, a lot of people think about that as a corporate topic, but it applies across the board, doesn't it? I mean, parents try to influence their kids. We try to influence our social organizations, or our churches, or civic organizations.
Right.
It plays across the board, doesn't it? I would think.
My goodness. Influence is 24/7, especially now with the situations we're living in. And depending on your situation, I have clients joking about how they're constantly practicing their influence on their significant others, on their children, to do their homeschooling or whatever it might be. That's really where I start with someone too, Scott, is I really have them take a step back and look at, how do you come across in your day-to-day? How do you come across your friends, your family, your community? Because to me, that's your natural self. That's your authenticity. And so many leaders will say to me, when I am in a high stakes conversation, or I am in the boardroom, or whatever it might be, I want to make sure that the best of me comes through. I also want people to just feel the connection and engagement that I have in my day to day. And that might be a word to the wise to all of our listeners today, is just take a step back. ask the people around you that are going to tell you the truth. How much influence do you have? How do you come across? That's always a great place to start if you want to make some changes.
Well, and I mentioned to you before that I really am knocked out by your book, and you've got it behind you. I've got it on the cover behind you.
Yeah.
And just for folks who have not read it, could you talk about your book just a little bit? Because the Influence Redefined is such a terrific title, because it begs the question, okay, I think I knew what influence is, but how have today's times redefined that? Could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, exactly. Playing off what you just said, most of us believe what it is. And here's what we think it is. I've got something big coming up, how I redefine that. And I practice, I think through it, I prepare. That's not influence. Influence is not something that you turn on and you turn off. Perhaps that's why half of New Year's resolutions, not even half, I read that only 15% of resolutions will last through the month of January. Like that's crazy. And it's because it's hard work to be consistent. Therefore, in the book, when we redefine influence, we say that influence is this ability that you can move people to take action long after the interaction occurs. I mean, based on what the work that you do, Scott, you and I both know that you don't influence, you don't move people by one email, by one podcast. It doesn't happen that way. It's a series of how people experience you where trust gets built, and is it consistent? And that's the other side of influence that we've briefly touched on here. Body language and messaging is how we define influence, that it's consistent. It's like an athlete, however an athlete will prep Monday through Thursday is how they'll perform on Friday. We just don't think that way. We think I'll do it when I need to do it. But here's the deal. Your name is on everything that you do, everything you say, everything that you toss out there. You just want to make sure it's a name that you're proud of, that it's a reputation and a personal brand that you've created on purpose.
And you mentioned the word trust. Good grief. How do you influence, at least in a positive manner, unless there is trust there?
Mm-hmm.
How do individuals go about enhancing trust, or perhaps if they've lost trust, regaining some of the trust that's been eroded over a period of time?
Exactly. How much time do you have, right? But if we broke it down, we start with body language. I am a big believer that how people experience you really determines the level of trust you have and the type of relationships that you have. There's only one behavior, Scott, that conveys trust consistently, and that's what you do with your eyes. I mean, this podcast, this interview would be a lot different if this is what you would see me do. And as I've been meeting with clients, I mean, this is constant. And I'm thinking, your camera is on, we can see you. So whether you are here or you're in person, I talk a lot about eye connection, which means only speak when you see eyes. No eyes, no talk. That's easy to remember. That's one piece of body language. And it's something as parents, how many of your parents that listen in have taught their kids to do that? Look me in the eye, tell me you didn't do it. Yeah. So we've learned that, but has this gotten in the way where suddenly we're like, this is more important? So that's one way. The second, as common sense as this is, follow through. If you say you're going to do it, do it. And it's such common sense. My father used to always tell my sisters and I, there's two things you have to do to be the top 1%. And that is follow through on everything you say you're going to do and show up on time. I remember as a child, Scott, I thought I can do that. That I think I can do and make that happen. So it's the follow through and it's being consistent. Here's what I mean by this. This happened. This was right before this all started to go down last fall. I get a call from a VP of sales here in Chicago. Never met him. And he says, I think I need your help. Every Monday of the beginning of the month, we come together as a group and we talk about our sales strategy for the month. A couple of Mondays ago, my team didn't know I was running late. I'm in the hallway outside of where they were all sitting, and I overheard someone say, let's say his name was Scott, I wonder which Scott is going to show up today. And how many times, maybe even for yourself, Scott, you might know some of your clients that in person or over the phone, they're rock solid and you admire them. You feel the trust with them. I've got a couple of clients, when I experience them outside the office, I start to second guess, wow, which one are you? I would say those are the top three that we all can easily start today to really make sure and check in. Are we doing it or not?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, Stacey. I was having a conversation earlier this morning with a friend, and we were talking about one of the nicest compliments that we get as speakers is when someone goes, "Wow, you're the same person off the platform," because we've kind of become accustomed sometimes to speakers that, and to me, that's acting. That's not speaking, right? When you get on and the persona you have on stage is totally incongruent with who you are as a person.
Right.
And I'm in the early days, there was someone that I looked up to as a hero in the business. And then when I met them, they were nothing like what their on-stage persona was. And it soiled the experience.
And once you break that, I think once you break that and people start guessing, how are you going to build that back? I'm not sure that I don't have advice on. I don't know how you build the trust back once you destroy it. Take it as a compliment when people say to you,
"Oh,
hey, I always know what I'm going to get."
Yeah, you're the same. You're the same. And it was funny what you said too, coincidental, because in my book Iconic, here I do all this studying about companies and about what customers are wanting, and you do all this research, and the answer is they want you to do what you said you would do when you said you would do it. And I'm like, I'll say that in the speech and people write it down. I'm thinking, if you got to write that down, really, if that thought never occurred to you before,
right? Our line, Scott.
But yet, I don't think it's that they haven't thought of it before. We just constantly need to be reminded of it. We get so busy doing what we do. We need these reminders, Stacey. It's so important.
We go with the saying, and I bet you do too, based off what you just said, common sense does not mean common practice.
Yes.
And everything that we talk about around influence and how do you do it through your body language and your messaging, it's the same thing where people are, wow. And all I'm telling them is, here's the deal. Here's the difference between me saying it and you knowing it. You have forgotten. You've forgotten about it. You haven't been doing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes even I know your work, going back to what we know to be true, and what a perfect time to do that right now. While you're at home, what a great time to just take a step back and really look at yourself.
Absolutely. It troubles me because my publisher sent something to me the other day about how much personal development, self-help, management books, the sale of them are down dramatically, drastically.
Really?
Yeah, have just fallen off a cliff. And even some of the evergreen books like 7 Habits and those that are, it's almost like, I've always thought the greatest book written was What to Expect When You're Expecting, because that's going to be on the bookshelf forever, right? I mean, there's never a time, we're not having babies anymore. It's not, I've always
especially now, right?
Right. I mean, and so in our world, the books like 7 Habits and Who Moved My Cheese, and there are certain that the publishers call evergreen books. They sell every year, and those have fallen off a cliff, and people aren't buying and reading right now, and that really disheartens me, because I think if there's ever a time that you need to read Influence Redefined, and you probably have more time to do it, now is it. That's why I love the folks that show up and watch the show every day for half an hour. It's just a little break to just think about some of these things that we have the time. So if somebody wants to get started, Stacey, they're like, okay, I buy into it, and I love the Monday to Monday. She has influenced me. I'm there. Where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah, two first ideas. And we can all do this in our home, is first constructive feedback. But when I'm saying constructive feedback, I don't mean, what do you think of me? Oh, good. Nice job. Great. It was really good. And that's typically the fake feedback that we hear. But really ask individuals that know you well in your personal life and your professional life, simply ask them, what do I do that makes me come across trustworthy? What could I do to be more clear, more concise, whatever it is that you want to work on? And Scott, I am guessing there is someone in your personal life, especially if you're living with them right now, that can't wait to give you feedback, especially after seeing you for a couple of weeks. That would be step number 1. When you get that down, then take a bigger step and start experiencing yourself through the eyes and ears of your listeners. Video, audio record. And how many times your listeners are on Zoom, the distraction perhaps of you seeing yourself on video, but capture it. Just capture the video, because when you can really experience, this is how I think I come across versus what reality states. At that point, you increase your awareness. That's when change occurs. Without that experience, I really believe we walk around life thinking, well, if I feel good, I must be effective. I must be influential. And you're right, Scott. Like, now's the time. I've been telling all of our clients that why not come out of this so much stronger, so much smarter, so much better, whatever better means to you, because you may never get this window again. And I think to some degree, it's a little bit of a gift. Some will take advantage of it, and others are going to miss this window of opportunity right now.
It strikes me too. If they watch every day, they've heard me say this, but I hate the term "the new normal." I really, because first of all, if it's new, it's not going to feel normal, and if it's normal, it's not going to feel new. And it'll be a while before anything feels it. The other one that challenges me is pivot, because growing up in Indiana, basketball was a sport, and they taught us when we pivoted, we turned our back to what our challenge. We
good point.
And I want to embrace, but I don't want to pivot, if that makes sense. And what we have to do is to embrace these new skills that we learn, or these new techniques that we can apply. And gosh, you are teaching us such an important technique. And I sometimes think, Stacey, it's also so easily overlooked, because it's one of those things we kind of think we know, but yet we haven't examined it.
Yeah.
How do we know? Do you encounter that people think, oh, well, I'm a leader.
All the time. And really our saving grace is the video. You start videotaping people, you start giving them feedback that will change their perspective very, very quickly. And we walk around life with a totally different perspective of how we come across rather than what reality states. And if it feels good, I think we get comfortable there. Maybe that's another tip for your listeners, is get comfortable being uncomfortable during this time. And I'm not talking about your lifestyle. I get that. I mean, your development is take a closer look. What do you have to lose? I always think, wouldn't you rather know than not know what people are saying behind your back?
Oh,
because that's really what reputation sometimes is. If you're not getting feedback and you're not practicing and holding yourself accountable to develop, most likely your reputation is what everyone is saying behind your back.
Yeah. Jeff Bezos said that a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? And it's true with our personal brand as well, right? It's not what people say to our face. It's as you're saying, it's how they express that they perceive us in the conversations that we have is really what it's all about.
And especially when you talk about that, I think about leaders, because I've had several leaders say to me, why hasn't anyone else told me what you've told me? And my response to that is, well, who's going to tell the CEO that they take too long to get to the point? No one's going to tell you that. Maybe it was last spring, I had a client here in Chicago, Scott, and he's a CEO. We did some mentoring with him. And his whole thing was, I want to make sure that I do come across trustworthy, that my teams feel like they can connect and engage with me. Well, we videotaped. That's what we do. We videotaped him, and we're sitting down, we're watching the playback, and he looks at me and he says, I bet you wonder how I ever became a CEO. Well, that was one of those moments where I thought, do I respond to that? Do I just put underneath the carpet? When I asked him, where's that coming from? He said to me, I've just realized after watching my playback that my executive team tells me what they think I want to hear, and I've never been recorded. And that's a simple step, because you've got your phone. You can easily record yourself as often as you want to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's well, you triggered a thought. I gave a speech to a group one time, big company, and the CEO, Fortune 500 company, said, when I'm done being a CEO, I think I'm going to do what you do, because my audiences love me. And I couldn't resist. I just couldn't resist.
Yes.
And he became a friend and a client, so it worked out all right. But I said, how do you do in front of audiences that your name isn't on their paychecks?
That's a good one.
Like, and I've heard our mutual friend Brian Palmer there in Chicago use that line as well. And I mean, we get it, particularly in organizations, right? If you've reached a position of leadership, the people around you are going to respond differently than the people that aren't on the org chart, or aren't, your customers are going to respond differently than your colleagues. It's so critical.
It's interesting because you're having me reflect back to some of the stories over the years. And if I could put them into two categories, the leaders that come to us that want mentoring are usually already pretty good, which they're the best to mentor. And when you go into then their company and you start to meet their teams and their staff, no matter what level they are at, the culture reflects that leader's development. It's really interesting. Like there's just this real push and advocacy on developing our people. And then you've got the other category where this wasn't too long ago. I received a call from an individual who wanted us to train their executive team. It didn't work out. When I went back to find out, what was it? Where did we miss the mark? And she goes, oh, no. We really called you because we wanted you to really focus on our CEO. But when we approached the CEO with your proposal, he said, no, we're good. We don't need this. Which is interesting. That's another, they're going around him and they're not going to see him. But I think when you had made a question earlier about what's a powerful skill for leaders, that's another reason why the ability to communicate with influence is so critical, because it will spread. Yeah. It will spread throughout the company very quickly, and it starts to develop the culture. And sometimes that culture is people being so much more open to give feedback. I'm talking real feedback, feedback and focusing on how can we always develop and become better, because we're never influential 100%. It's we're aware, and it's how do we keep growing that level of influence and how people experience us.
I'm constantly fascinated about how someone gets to a leadership position and isn't open to feedback.
Yeah.
I haven't talked about this very much, but 4 years ago, I got a call from the campaign manager of one of the presidential candidates, and they asked would I coach the candidate who was in the final running. Would I be a speech coach? And I asked the question, are you looking for a coach, or are you looking just for a cheerleader, for someone to tell them how great their presentations are, that you can say, oh, here's someone, who's a speaker, and he's going to tell you how great of a speaker you are. And he said, I got to get back with you on that, which right away is a bad sign. Right? I mean,
that's a sign of a wrong fit.
Yeah. You got to think about that. and they finally called back and they said, our candidate is not coachable, but he needs encouragement, but not coaching. And I said, well, then that's fake encouragement. And I didn't do it, but it just re-triggered. It's a fascination to me.
It is, yeah.
How some of these folks can get to that point, and the feedback would make them better. The feedback would make them more successful. Not just the organization. It would be so great for them.
Yeah.
So, if our viewers today take nothing more than, and I know they will, they're going to take much more than this, but just get that honest feedback, and then do something with it. Don't just, do something with it, and don't shoot the messenger.
That's the other side of it. Feedback sometimes is a gift you don't want to receive, but they give it to you anyway. And it's okay, because you still get to decide. You're bringing up a good point, because we've been talking about make sure you get constructive feedback and really find out what works, what doesn't work, where am I causing distractions? Then you've got to sit down and you have to think about, well, what am I going to do with it? Because the action part is where people will see the results and you'll experience the results. You just brought up a really good point about leaders, why some are so open to it and others. When we've worked with clients that have said to us, when they find out that we really give feedback, they'll make comments, well, just be careful with the level of feedback that you give. And when I've asked, well, what do you mean by that? Sometimes the response has been, you need to understand our leaders, they've worked hard to be in this position. And I think, well, that's why they need more feedback, because they've worked hard and they've reached this point. But I think that's maybe another piece that, if there's one thing else you can take from this, is just be open to it. You still get to decide what you want to do with it. You don't have to take everyone's advice, but otherwise you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's a really important point as well, I think, is that it doesn't mean you have to take the advice, but being open to it is the first step. I mean, I've had people give me advice and it just didn't feel right in my gut, so I didn't follow it. but thanking them. And I think people want to know that you've listened. Is that on target? I mean, they want to know that you respect their opinion, even if you don't implement their proposed solution.
Right. Which is also part of that building your reputation and going back to one of the first questions you asked me about trust. To me, if I can go to you and give you, not that I would, some people just kind of come up to you and give you feedback just out of the blue.
What do you think, Stacey?
Fine too. Yes. But when someone gives you that feedback and you're able to accept it, that to me is part of a leadership quality as well, because you've got enough confidence to know that you're okay with whatever anyone throws you, because you're always in the learning mode. You know that the more you, what is the saying, Scott? Is it the faster you learn, the faster you earn, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So do it fast. Do it now while you're kind of sitting still for some of us.
And now's the time. Bruce, by the way, has mentioned here, Bruce is big in video. He is one of the incredible in video. And I record all my presentations and watch and share it for feedback. Yeah, that's one of the things I've learned, by the way, off the subject a little bit, but Bruce, in terms of this, is when I try to get a video of every speech, but I can't watch it immediately after the speech. Because, are you this way, Stacey? Because in my head, I'm still thinking of how I meant to communicate it as opposed to how I really did. And so I have to give myself a little breathing room, a little space before I watch my own video to evaluate it, because I have to separate myself from my intentions.
It's that, and I think because being what we do for a living, we throw ourselves out there. So after I just threw myself out there, and now I need to watch a video right away, I'm the same way. I need to just soak in the time before I rip it apart. Because everyone always asks me, does it get easier to do the videotape? I'm like, are you kidding? I think it gets harder because you're that much more aware, not only in the moment of being recorded, but now when you watch it, you become very critical. A point for your viewers, I'm sure Bruce probably does this as well. One thing that we always coach our mentees on is when you're watching your playbacks, watch it 4 times. Ooh. You probably have heard of this, Scott, where first just watch the whole thing, right? Just absorb it all in. The second time you watch it, get rid of the volume, because you just want to see when your message isn't consistent with your body language, how distracting is your body language, or does it really enhance the message? Third time you watch it, turn away from it, only listen to it. Because that way you're not distracted by the body language or everything else that's going on. You really get to dissect your messaging, the pauses that you might be using. How do you lay it out? Finally, the 4th time is put it all together. And then that's where you decide, what will I do with this? How am I going to change this for next time?
I love that. That is so good. We're running a couple minutes over. I apologize for holding you, but we've got a bunch of folks. And by the way, this is coming in from Twitter. I love this. The truth shall set you free. Let us all be attentive. But and I apologize for the language ahead of time. But I've got a friend that says the truth shall set you free, but first it'll piss you off.
It's so true.
I mean, it can't be said better than that. It'll set you free, but first it's going to upset you. And I've always thought that's such a great line.
Or Scott, it just gives you tougher skin. You get tougher skin as you do this, and you start to know what do you just need to roll off. What's really important now? Maybe that's another piece of advice: as you're all out there recording yourself or now opening up for feedback. You don't have to do everything at once, but don't sit still. Like even if you did something once a day or thought about skills during every single conversation that you had, one skill at a time, every skill every day. There's going to be changes that'll happen really quickly. It doesn't take too long.
Yeah. It's funny. Somebody asked me what one of the toughest things was that I had to learn about speaking, in the early days. And I said, it was looking at 100 evaluations and you got 2 people that hated you and not evaluating them, not putting their opinion in higher esteem than the 98 that liked you.
That's right.
Right. And so it is being open to the feedback and being sensitive to it, but yet when people are critical, being able to evaluate where that's coming from.
Yeah. And maybe it's going into it too, Scott. Sometimes I talk a lot about prepare for the feedback, and whether it's you're asking someone for the feedback or you're going to do it on your own through video playback, always say to that person, here's what I'm working on. Here's how I want to come across. That's what I want you to evaluate me on. Now, if it is a situation where if we weren't live right now, Scott, and it was just you and I having a conversation, I'd have you interactively coach me. And the more that you can have someone do that to you or for you to do to your teams, the quicker you'll increase the awareness. Where when people are in a conversation, they know immediately when they're creating distraction because of that interactive coaching you did. If it's something that you can interactively coach, then afterwards, I would ask you after this live event to say, all right, what did you think? Give me feedback. But set it up, because that's going to get you closer to, well, how do I develop versus that was really good. Just keep doing it.
Yeah, just keep that. I don't mean to keep you longer.
No, you're fine. I enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, same here. You're one of my favorites, as you know. And is there any last thing that you would suggest? I'm going to suggest the last thing is go to Amazon as soon as we're done and get Influence Redefined. But what would you suggest, Stacey? If I'm buying into this, I want to get started. Help me. What's the first thing I do?
Yeah. I feel like I've got to come up with something new besides the feedback and the videotaping. Doing that, I would literally, how about before the weekend, sit down and think through, how do I want to come across? So just create a personal brand, whatever that looks like. And I'm not talking your logo. I'm just talking, how do you want people to experience you? Do that. And then write down what you think, what's going on. Third column, last column, what are you willing to do? Because that's going to be the big kicker. As you start to get the feedback and you start to watch these video playbacks, you've got to be ready to do the work. You've got to be ready to focus on it, be disciplined on it. So make that commitment, because I don't want you to fail out of the gate. So maybe it's also smaller steps on that third column. But here's the deal. It's not 21 days that takes to change a habit. I know we've heard that a lot, but there's research out of University College of London that came out earlier this year that states it takes 2 months to 8 months to change a habit. Therefore, whether it takes you 5 or 500 days, you got to start with day one. Why not make this week day one before you hit the weekend? You have nothing to lose. What do you have to lose? You become a better communicator and people connect with you more. You have more trust. That's not bad. That's not a loss.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And you know, you didn't even need to come up with something new, because people join in and out of the live stream. So it works out great. You know, and thank you to the folks that have shared this. I've noticed several folks have been sharing as you've been talking, Stacey, which shows they're loving what you had to say.
Good. And as long as they can take it away and it's helpful, that's what I'm here for. Thank you so much for trusting me with your followers, Scott.
Oh, are you kidding me? It's such a thrill to have you on, and thank you for taking time to do it. Hang on, and we'll be back. I'll be back right after this. I just want to say thanks to everybody for watching today, and sorry for the little technological bobbles that we had there. Thank you, Cox Cable, for that. Yeah, I write books on customer service too. So I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you so much. I'll be back again tomorrow, same time, with another edition of Daily Distinction. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for being here every day. And I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.